For the first store, I'll take you to Oregon. Fall 2019. I never thought of myself as someone who would attract a stalker. But sometimes you don't get to choose who's watching. I lived a quiet life in a small Oregon town, working remotely as a graphic designer. My house was nestled at the edge of a wooded area, which I had always found peaceful, until I realized I was never truly alone. It started subtly, small things that I dismissed at first. A strange feeling of being watched when I took out the trash at night. The sensation of movement in my peripheral vision when I worked late into the evening. I convinced myself it was nothing, that my mind was playing tricks on me, but then the real signs began. One morning, I stepped outside to find deep footprints in the damp earth beneath my bedroom window. They were fresh, and they didn't belong to me. The logical side of my brain told me it could have been a passerby or a lost hiker, but something about the way they stopped directly in front of my window and then led back into the trees unsettled me. I tried to brush it off, but that night as I lay in bed scrolling through my phone, a soft tapping sound echoed from outside. It was rhythmic, deliberate, too slow to be a tree branch, too calculated to be an animal. My breath hitched as I forced myself to look. Through the blinds, I saw the faint outline of a figure standing just beyond the reach of my porch light. My stomach twisted into a knot. I didn't move. I barely even breathed. My mind raced with possibilities. Should I call someone? Was this even real? Then, as if sensing my hesitation, the figure took a step back, retreating into the trees. The next morning, I found something that made my blood run cold. A single smudged handprint on my bedroom window. The following nights were worse. The tapping returned, sometimes from different sides of the house. I started locking every door and window religiously, double-checking before I went to sleep. But locks couldn't keep out the fear. The feeling of being watched became suffocating. Every shadow outside felt like it could move at any moment. One evening I came home to find my back door slightly ajar. My stomach sank as I stood frozen in the doorway. I knew I had locked it before leaving. I hesitated before stepping inside, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Everything seemed normal, nothing stolen, nothing broken, but the air felt different, heavier. I checked every room, every closet, but found nothing. That night I barely slept. The next morning I noticed something else. My fridge door was slightly open. I would never have left it like that. Something was wrong. The thought that someone had been inside while I was sleeping made me physically sick. Desperate, I installed security cameras around my property. If something was happening, I needed proof. I set the system up to alert my phone whenever motion was detected. The first few nights were quiet, and I began to think maybe I had imagined it all. Then around 3 a.m. my phone buzzed. A motion alert. My fingers trembled as I opened the app. The live feed showed my front yard, empty except for the wind moving the trees. I switched to the backyard camera, and that's when I saw him, a man, standing at the edge of the woods, completely still. He was just beyond the tree line, barely visible, but he was there, watching. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. He didn't move, didn't flinch. I had no idea how long he had been standing there. My skin crawled as I stared at the screen, willing him to leave, but he didn't. He just stood there. I called the police, my voice shaking as I tried to explain. By the time they arrived, he was gone. They searched the area, found nothing. The officers assured me they would patrol the neighborhood more frequently, but I could tell they thought I was overreacting. I barely slept for the next few nights. Every small sound made me jolt awake, my heart racing. I kept checking the cameras obsessively, hoping I wouldn't see him again. And then, one night, I did. But this time he wasn't standing in the woods. He was closer. He was on my porch. The moment I saw him, my stomach dropped. He stood directly in front of my door, staring into the camera with empty, soulless eyes. My phone nearly slipped from my hands. He raised his hand slowly out and knocked. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I couldn't breathe. I called the police again, but by the time they arrived, the porch was empty. Again, they took my report, did another sweep, but I could tell they thought I was wasting their time. The next morning I found a note slipped under my door. I like watching you sleep. That was the final straw. I packed a bag, called a friend, and left town that day. I never went back. I sold the house remotely and never set foot in that place again. Whoever he was, he wanted me to know he was always there, watching, waiting, and I never want to know what would have happened if I had opened that door. For the second story, I take you to Chicago, winter 2021. Moving to the city was supposed to be a fresh start, but sometimes the past has a way of following you. After a rough breakup, I needed a change, a place where I could be completely alone and rebuild my life. I found a small but decent apartment in an old building downtown. The rent was cheap, the neighbors kept to themselves, and despite the occasional creaking pipes, it felt like a good fit. For a while it was, until I realized I wasn't alone. It started small, things I could easily explain away. My keys weren't where I left them. My closet door would be slightly open when I knew I had closed it. The light in my bathroom would be on, even though I was sure I turned it off. I chalked it up to stress, exhaustion, my mind playing tricks on me. But then the noises started. At night, when everything was quiet, I would hear soft shuffling. It wasn't the normal sounds of a city apartment, footsteps from the unit above, doors opening and closing in the hallway. This was different. It came from inside my apartment, a faint, deliberate movement like someone trying not to be heard. I told myself it was just the building settling, the old wood shifting in the cold, but deep down I knew better. Then came the breathing. One night I woke up suddenly, heart pounding, unsure why. The room was dark, silent except for the hum of the heater, but then I heard it, deep, slow breathing. Not mine, it was coming from the corner of my room. My stomach twisted as I held my breath, straining to hear. The sound was soft, controlled, like someone was standing there watching me sleep. I reached for my phone, barely daring to move, and turned on the flashlight. The room was empty. Nothing but my desk, my chair, my dresser. I told myself it had to be my imagination, but I barely slept after that. The next day I searched the apartment top to bottom. Every closet, every cabinet, under the bed, even inside the air vents. Nothing. But the feeling of being watched never left me. Then one evening I came home late from work and something felt wrong. The air was heavier, charged with something I couldn't explain. I walked into my bedroom and stopped cold. My bed was different. The blanket was slightly pulled back, the pillow indented like someone had been lying there. My heart pounded in my ears. I had made my bed that morning. I was sure of it. A sickening thought hit me. What if someone had been here? What if they were still here? I backed out of the room slowly, grabbed a knife from the kitchen and checked every inch of the apartment. Again, nothing. But as I turned to leave my bedroom, something caught my eye. The closet door. It was open. Just a crack. I had checked it earlier. It had been closed. My breath hitched as I stepped toward it, every instinct screaming at me to run. I reached out, grabbed the handle, and yanked the door open. Empty. Just my clothes, my shoes, a couple of old boxes, but then I saw it at the very back of the closet, behind a row of hanging jackets. The wall looked wrong. I pushed the clothes aside and felt my stomach drop. A panel, a loose wooden panel. I pressed against it, and it shifted slightly. A hidden space. I reached for my phone with shaking hands and turned on the flashlight. Slowly, I pulled the panel away and felt my entire body go numb. There was a small crawl space, and inside, a thin, stained mattress, empty food wrappers, a pile of clothes, and, worst of all, a notebook. I grabbed it, flipping it open with trembling fingers. Inside were pages of messy, scrawled handwriting, dates, times, notes like he leaves at 8 a.m. He talks to his mom on Sundays. He sleeps facing the door, and then the final page. I like watching him. I think he knows now. I dropped the notebook and stumbled backward, my breath coming in short gasps. Someone had been living inside my apartment, watching me, studying me. I ran out of the apartment, shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone as I called 911. The police arrived quickly, sweeping the unit, but whoever had been there was already gone. The crawl space led to an old maintenance tunnel that connected several units in the building. They found a few signs that someone had been staying there, discarded food, blankets, but no one knew for how long. The landlord acted shocked, said he had no idea the tunnel even existed. I didn't care. I packed my things and left that night. I never found out who he was, how long he had been there, or what he had planned. But sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, feeling like someone is watching me, and I wonder, is he watching someone else now? For the last story, I take you to Manchester, UK, spring 2022. After a lifetime in London, moving to Manchester felt like a fresh start. But soon, I realized that something or someone was already waiting for me. My new apartment was in an older building, the kind with creaky wooden floors and high ceilings, but I liked its character. It Felt safe, cozy even, the kind of place where nothing bad should ever happen. I believed that until I met the man on the other side of my door. And it started on a Sunday evening. I had just finished dinner when I heard a soft knock at the door. Not a firm, confident knock, just a light tapping, hesitant. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I figured it was a neighbor. I opened the door without thinking, and standing there was a man I had never seen before. He was tall, gaunt, with deep-set eyes that didn't quite meet mine. He was dressed normally, but something about him felt wrong. He just stood there, staring, unspeaking. I hesitated before finally asking if he needed something. He blinked slowly and, in the quietest voice, said, "I used to live here." His words sent an odd chill through me. I managed an awkward response, telling him I had just moved in a few months ago. He nodded, but instead of leaving, he shifted slightly, tilting his head as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "It sounds different now." I forced a polite smile, told him I had to go, and shut the door. As I turned the lock, a strange sensation crept up my spine, like I had just done something I wasn't supposed to. That night, I double-checked every window, every latch, convinced that something about that encounter wasn't right. The next night, the knocking came again, same light tapping, same slow, hesitant rhythm. I didn't answer. I stood on the other side of the door, holding my breath, waiting for him to leave. After what felt like an eternity, I heard him whisper, just barely loud enough for me to hear, "I don't like the way you changed it." My heart pounded in my chest. I refused to move, refused to make a sound. Finally, after a long stretch of silence, I heard slow, deliberate footsteps walking away down the hall. I barely slept. The next morning I told myself it was just some strange guy, maybe mentally unwell, maybe confused. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. That night, the knocking didn't come. Instead, as I was brushing my teeth, I heard a soft scratching sound. It was faint, but steady. I froze, turning off the water, listening. It was coming from the door, not knocking, scratching. Long, slow drags of fingernails against the wood. I grabbed my phone and dialed the non-emergency police line, my hands trembling as I explained what was happening. They sent an officer to check the building, but by the time they arrived, the hallway was empty. No sign of him, no security footage showing where he had gone. The officer assured me he was likely harmless, just someone passing through, but told me to call if it happened again. The next few days were quiet. I started to believe it was over, until I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Faint, thin scratches at the bottom of my front door, like someone had been clawing at it. That night, I barricaded the door with my heaviest chair. At exactly 3 a.m., I woke up to the unmistakable sound of my doorknob turning. Not shaking, not rattling, just a slow, steady turn. I shot up in bed, my heart hammering. The chair against the door didn't move, the lock held. But then through the silence I heard a whisper, a voice so quiet, but I knew exactly what it said. "Let me in!" I didn't sleep. At sunrise, I packed a bag and went to stay at a friend's flat. I told my landlord everything, and they agreed to change the locks. I considered moving, but part of me didn't want to be scared out of my own home. For a while it seemed like it had worked. The knocking stopped, the scratching stopped, the silence returned. Then a few weeks later, I came home late one evening and stepped inside. My flat was quiet, exactly as I had left it. But as I closed the door behind me, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A chair. One of my chairs. It had been moved. It was sitting directly in front of my bedroom door, facing it. And scratched into the wood, just above the handle, were 3 words. "I found another." I moved out the next day. Stalkers are terrifying not just because they watch, but because they wait. Whether it's a shadow in the woods, someone hiding inside your home, or a stranger who keeps coming back, the worst part is never knowing what they really wanted, or if they're truly gone. Because sometimes when you think you're safe, when you think you've escaped, that's when they come back. If these stories sent chills down your spine, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying true horror stories. And don't forget to hit the bell icon, because the scariest things happen when you're not expecting them. Stay safe and stay aware. You never know who might be watching.